All righty. Go get it, nation. We all know what time it is. It is 3 o'clock Eastern time and on a Tuesday. And that generally means one thing. It is time for a no holds barred, no safety net, no script, no notes, seat of our pants discussion with a valued guest here on Ringside. Welcome to the show. We are broadcasting live currently on LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, YouTube, and we are also simulcasting on Clubhouse. And a reminder, if you are listening on Clubhouse, to please mute your microphone. If you are joining us today, please make it a point to say hello in the comments, pop your name in there, and we will give you the requisite shout out. And while we're ready to, before we're ready to introduce all of our audience members as they jump in on the comments, let's give a big, warm, go get it, fist bump hello to a friend of mine, a colleague that I respect immensely. She hosts a little podcast called the Audio Branding Podcast, and she also has quite a career as a voiceover talent. Welcome to the show, Jodi Krangle.
Hello. So great to be here.
How cool is this? I can
Pretty
remember,
cool.
geez, maybe it was about a year and a half ago, the roles were reversed.
Yes, they were.
I got to hang out on the Audio Branding Podcast. And man, we had a nice in-depth chat. That was cool.
We did. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So real quick, let's say hello to some of the folks joining us here. Oh, my better half has jumped on. Elaine, how are you, darling?
Hello.
Jim Cooper, the VO Big Dog, is here. Craig Acock is here. George Allen Ruth, Robert Jonathan, the animation voice. Xenia Gallagher is here. John Grimes, what's up, kiddo?
Hey, John.
And we'll try to weave in more shout outs as people jump on. Let me remind you all, please ask questions of Jodi. We want you guys to get your questions answered.
Go for it.
We're going to be talking podcasting today. Mm-hmm. Of course, I've hosted my own podcast on many episodes and been fortunate to have a lot of the folks watching this live stream as listeners. But it's always nice to bring someone in that can talk about the benefits, the process, the why, the how of podcasting. And I could think of no one better than you to do that. Because how long have you been doing the Audio Branding Podcast?
Well, I started it in November of 2019.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So
that's not a long time compared to a lot of people.
Well, but still, you've been consistent though. I mean, how many episodes have you done in that time?
I'm probably at like almost 70 right now, but I'm programmed out to, I think in another week, I'll be programmed out to number 77 or 78. So yeah, I do have things going pretty far in advance, which does take some of the pressure off.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. You want to be prepared and be able to hit the ground running. So how many interviews are you doing in a week or in a month, like to prepare for?
Less than you might think. It comes in fits and spurts. So I tend to program them out where I'll have maybe 3 in like a week and a little, and then I'll have a spell where I won't be interviewing anyone for a little bit. And I go on other podcasts too. So for me, like I'm trying to get on, let's say 8 podcasts a month,
Wow,
so
okay.
I'll try to do that. So it's, a little bit of both.
So 70 some odd episodes, in a couple of years here. And for your fellow voice talent, for the folks that even aren't voice talent that are involved on LinkedIn or doing content marketing, trying to grow their entrepreneurship, what was the epiphany? You said, you know what, I need to do a podcast. Like what got your attention?
You know what? I fought it for so long.
Okay.
I'll be totally honest. I was part of a mastermind, a business mastermind group. So it had nothing to do with voiceover. I was the only voice actor there. And it was a group where we were meeting every week on Zoom and we were talking about issues and how we wanted to promote our businesses and all of that kind of thing. And the person who was in charge of the mastermind, his name is Vincent Puglisi. And he has a podcast called Total Life Freedom, which I actually recommend to anyone who's listening because it's a 5 to 7 minute long little, pat on the back and punch in the gut at the same time that you need to, that you need to pay attention to, but it's like a nice way to start my mornings. I have my morning coffee while I'm listening to that podcast every morning. And it's super simple. He doesn't have an intro or outro. He just talks for
Turns the mic on and he goes.
exactly. Yeah. And it's just words of wisdom basically. And from a guy who's had some hard knocks.
Gotcha.
So it was nice. But he has a great business group that I'm no longer a part of at this point. But for a couple of years I was, and we would get together every week and we'd be on Zoom. We'd talk to each other and we'd talk about our problems and our issues and the things we wanted to do with our careers. And one of the things that kept coming up was that we should all have a podcast because it's one of those great ways to promote yourself but also add value to the people that are listening. So it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely.
But it's also a lot of work, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
So I resisted it for a long time because I really wasn't sure I had the bandwidth for it. But in June of 2019, I just went for it, started something. It was called Jodi's Silver Linings, and it was just words of wisdom because I'm old.
Stop.
And but like simple things like peace is okay. Like you don't have to be productive every second of the day, or like if you're in a moment, do you need to be taking a photograph of that? Like, can you just enjoy the moment? Things like
Sure.
this.
I got you.
Yeah, words of whatever. And I did 30 episodes of that, and I learned a lot as I was going on. But I started to be asked to be a life coach, and
Oh boy. Okay.
that wasn't where I was heading with that. So I figured I was not on the right track. That maybe that was not that was not where I should be going. And I brought this to the mastermind group and they said, well, what are you passionate about? And I said, well, I love what I do. I really love voiceovers and
Sure.
I just love the whole spectrum of sound. And they were like, well, there you go.
Perfect.
So I started audio branding because it's the wider umbrella of the tiny little part that I contribute as a voice actor. And I wanted to learn about that wider spectrum of experience. So it's not only about advertising and marketing and branding, which it is, and sound influences us a lot in that kind of thing, but it's also about life. I mean, sound influences our life.
Totally.
And these can be quite deep influences. So so there's a whole lot to explore, and I'm just super passionate about it, and I find it fascinating. So there's always someone new to talk about.
Well, we already have a question from the Peanut Gallery, which I will serve up to you shortly. Let's say hello to some more people that have joined us. Charlie Wyrock is here. Matthew Sackett, Pat Kennedy, Mr. Chad Erickson, the Duke of Demos.
Hey, Chad.
Deb DeVries is here. How are you? Mark Harrietha,
Mhm.
a fellow Canadian.
Yeah.
So Jim Cooper asks, how much time do you spend in prep on a per guest basis?
It depends on how well I know them. If I don't know them at all, I will generally look at their website, research their social media, do a little light stalking for
Sure.
the beginning part.
Been there, done
Um,
that.
Yeah. But also I have pre-interviews. So I will talk with someone for around 15 to 30 minutes before I actually invite them on the podcast. Because first of all, I want to make sure that we can have a decent conversation.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that they could actually be engaging. I don't want to
No
talk
duds
to,
allowed.
well, like there
I
are
said
some.
it. It's okay. No
Yeah,
duds allowed. It's fine.
there are some academics who are very well respected in their field, but they can't explain it to anyone. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, I get it.
so yeah, and that doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about. It just means that maybe that's not a podcast episode.
Yeah, you don't want your audience to go like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Sorry, I'm just
So-
making fun here. I'm having a
No,
good
it's
time.
fine.
You're on Ringside. This is what we do here.
Yeah, no, it's totally
Jennifer
fine.
Smelter says hello. Nick Middlecoff jumping on. What's up,
Hello.
Nick? Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining us. Encourage you guys to keep peppering Jodi with questions. Jim had a good one
By
there.
all means.
And I'll piggyback off Jim's question that
Mhm.
your preparation extends beyond your pre-interview and your research.
Yep.
You have to do a lot of other things to get a podcast episode off the ground. And
Oh, yeah.
of course, and we'll probably get into this later, for the talent that is looking maybe to start their own podcast and doesn't know where to begin, we're going to skip over that for now, but I want you to get into some of the other things that are necessary in order for you to have a podcast with listeners.
Well, yeah.
I mean, what do you have to do on your end to make that happen?
Well, originally, I mean, are we talking about hosting? Are we going back that
I'm
far?
talking like your podcast episode. You've done all of the research. You've asked the questions. You've done the recording.
Yep.
What happens between that and the episode dropping?
Well, you may or may not have an intro or outro to your podcast. You're editing it together so that you and your guests sound like you're actually having a conversation, which you probably did over Zoom or whatever you're using. But sometimes there's delay or anything like that. Like you want to sort of make sure that it all sounds like a fluid conversation.
Sure.
Also, there might be some pauses in there that you just want to get rid of just because it just takes up space and you don't need that space. And some pauses or flubbing of remembered facts and stuff like that that you might stop and start or things like that.
So there's audio editing
Pause.
involved.
Yeah, there's
What about on the promotion end?
the promotion. Oh my goodness. Once you promote it, once you have it published, then having an audiogram is a really great idea. There's a fabulous app called Headliner
Oh, yeah.
that will take your episode and maybe cut it into a snippet or something that you can then put a graphic on and you can use for promoting on social
You get
media.
a little dancing waveform and
Yeah, they're really quite handy. And in fact, I use them to publish to YouTube because you can put your whole episode using a graphic and then have that moving wave file. Because I don't do video for my podcast, but I do post to YouTube because that's a different audience.
sure.
And people are looking on YouTube all the time. It's probably not going to get you a huge amount of people listening if you're not doing video, but at the same time, it's another way for people to experience your content. So for me, that's the only reason I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to have a huge amount of people following me on YouTube. I'm doing it so that the people who want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, that's the easiest thing for them.
They can bump into it there.
Exactly. They can bump into it there, or they can just go there because they want to, you know?
Understood. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
we're big proponents of that, and making sure that you can bump into your network wherever they like to live the most.
Exactly. Yeah. Be where they are.
Another
Yeah.
question here from the audience. Zenya Gallagher asks, how do you select the topics?
It depends on the people I'm interviewing. And it also depends on what I'm interested in. I do solo episodes every now and again. Right now, I've kind of settled into a pattern of a 2-part episode and then a solo episode. So I'll interview someone, which generally lasts for 2 weeks because I split them into 2. And then I do a solo episode and then I do another 2-weeker. So, my topics vary depending on what I'm interested in and what has, tickled my fancy over the last little while. And a lot of the topics they're all sound related. So that's, that has to be the point. That's
Sure.
the point of the podcast. But, I'm talking about Foley and making sounds that don't exist, like the ones from Star Wars, or I'm talking about, I think the most recent one that I just did was based on how the tourism and travel industry could recover after COVID using sound, and how a lot of the advertisements and such that are going on now and people are rebranding themselves using sound, figuring out their brand DNA to entice people to pay more attention to them.
And remember them.
Yeah, and remember them, exactly. So there's, I've talked about jingles and how they've disappeared and they're sort of making a little bit of a comeback and, interesting things like that.
I heard you did an awesome episode about marketing back in the day. I don't know who that guy was, but that was a stellar episode. Let me be clear.
Yeah. And I talked to a lot of people about this. So one of the people that I tend to mention a lot, because this was my mind-blowing episode, and it's episode 19, and it's with Steve Keller, who is the sonic strategy director at Pandora for Studio Resonate. Yeah, Studio Resonate is their advertising agency there. And they're making groundbreaking advertising promotional stuff. Like, it's just really mind-blowing. And he's really interesting because he's a psychologist, a musician, and an ad guy. So
Holy
he's kind
moly.
of so he's kind of blending all of these really fascinating things, and seriously, the conversation blew my mind on a regular basis. But I've also talked to John McClane, who had, a studio called Dog and Pony in Vegas.
Wasn't he,
Um
didn't he jump from the Nakatomi Plaza? I'm kidding.
Yeah. You are not the first person to say that to me. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But
Funny.
yeah,
I'm
but
sorry. I'm a child. I'm 8
it's
years old. I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's okay. It's not like I'm not used to it. So he actually teaches a course on music and film at UNLV. And
Mm,
so a lot of the conversation that we had at that time was based around how music changes the impact, the emotional impact of a film. And you can change a trailer from a feel-good family movie to a horror trailer just by changing the music.
absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
it's really fascinating. Yeah. So all sorts of and, I've talked with a bunch of people about sonic, branding and, you know, I talked with the people at the International Sound Awards in Hamburg, and,
Wow.
the fellow who, was the creator of the Audio Branding Academy, which is also in, Hamburg and Berlin, and he and his colleague, his name is, Dr. Cornelius Ringe, and it's Ringe. And, he and his colleague Lars Ohlendorf, it was the other guy,
Okay.
they were fascinating. We had a really great conversation. So there's, like I've talked with Tom Emonson, who actually is, Pirate Radio Toronto. He
Okay.
does a lot of sonic, strategy stuff, and, his episode is programmed, like, way out. I, like, just heard it edited, and I'm super excited for it to come out, but it's, like, 2 months from now. Yeah, so, like, it fires me up. This whole thing just fires me up, and I love it.
I love it. A couple more questions from the audience here.
Sure.
Craig Aycock says, "How do you mainly post your podcast on like LinkedIn, or is it a different format?"
You know what? I am involved in Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and so I post on all of those. I tend to frequent LinkedIn and Facebook a little more than Twitter, but because of Clubhouse, I've been paying a little more attention to Twitter because that's what's linked up there.
Sure.
And I'm not on Instagram. So, yeah.
But that's not the
Yeah.
sole place where your podcast lives. You have a host.
No,
You're out on the
I'm
major
yeah.
channels.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's on, Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on all of the major ones that you could go to. So, yeah,
So
because
Scott,
I'm hosting. Yeah.
I got you. So
Mhm.
Scott Marlowe asks, "What's the best way to start off if you've never done a podcast before?" It's probably a long
Oh,
answer, but do the best you can.
good question. Well, first of all, I would look into why you're doing it. And, be passionate about your subject because otherwise it's not gonna last. So that would be number 1. Know whether you're gonna have an interview show or a solo show. Know whether you want an intro and outro or whether you don't, and you don't always need one.
Sure.
Maybe think about the length of, time that you want the podcast to go to. So when I'm doing an interview, it usually lasts between 40 minutes and 60 minutes, and that's why I split them into 2 because I want the podcasts each to be a little less than 30 minutes apiece.
Gotcha.
And then when I do my solo episodes, they're usually less than 6 minutes. They're not
Okay.
very long at all. So, I find that people kind of like the larger bites and the smaller bites, and they kind of, like, can interchange between the both.
Gotcha.
Um, but that's just me. I mean, you can decide whatever you wanna do. Uh, the next thing is to have some kind of recording because having the ability to do your own recordings is, a good thing. You need to be able to edit. Now, I outsource some of this stuff now, thankfully, but having a home studio of some kind, even as a podcaster, is a good idea. So you need a mic, you need headphones, you need to have some kind of way to record yourself. So some kind of like Audacity is free, GarageBand is free.
Sure.
You can use free stuff. As a voice actor, a lot of you will already have all of this stuff, so you won't need to worry about it.
Absolutely.
But then you also need to worry about hosting. So when you host, it's kind of like hosting your website. So you have a web host. You also have a podcast host, and that podcast host will distribute your podcast out to everywhere it needs to be, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of these other
And
places.
what are some of the companies that would commonly be known as a podcast host? I know I can say Anchor.fm,
Yeah.
for example, but give the crowd a few other choices.
Sure. There's Libsyn. That's another one. Buzzsprout is another one. I'm with one called Captivate, which is put together by a guy named Mark Asquith in the UK, who is really good at this kind of stuff and marketing wise really knows his stuff. So I like that one for that reason. But also because if you have more than one podcast, you can actually host it on Captivate and they only charge you by the download. So it doesn't matter how many podcasts you have. You can have 5. But if your downloads are below a certain amount, you're only getting charged $19.95 a month or whatever it is, as opposed to other places where they'll charge you based on each podcast.
So I have a question,
Mhm.
and I know what my answer is, but I want to hear
Sure.
what your answer is.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that you've mentioned a lot about investing. You got to
Yes.
invest a lot of time, preparation, promotion,
Yep.
recording, hosting. All these things have either time or a money attached to them.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the talent that says, hey, I'm going to talent, or the podcaster that says, I want to start a podcast because I want to make money at a podcast? Because that's, to me, is prevalent out there. They think just because they are recording a podcast, all of a sudden sponsors will come flocking and
Sure.
Donations will come in to make money. What say you, Jodi?
Yeah, I think you better be really passionate about it before you think about monetizing it. Yeah, it's something that you need to be very consistent with for probably, like, it could be a couple of years before you attract anyone that might want to sponsor you. And you may never. I mean, my podcast is a very niche subject, so the amount of downloads I'm going to get, it could be limited, and I'm okay with that. That's fine. But I'm reaching out to the people who I actually might consider clients. That's a lot of why I'm doing this, because I want to get to know my clients better. I want to know their pain points. I want to know what they're excited about, what really they get passionate about at the end of the day. I want to know how I can contribute to what they're doing, and knowing how they treat sound allows me to do that because I'm a voice actor, so I'm contributing to that end sound. And in a lot of cases, I think I'm also kind of interested in helping people navigate the weirdness of the world around them, because this is such a strange time and we're all very stressed.
Oh, we do. Sure.
Yeah, and sound can be a way for us to calm ourselves down. I've just recently done a lot of podcasts on ASMR. And I've had some people on who talk about binaural beats, and a woman who is an Australian sound healer, a shamanic sound healer.
Interesting.
So there are, and this in healthcare is actually really important too. So there's a whole lot of aspects of this, none of which I necessarily feel I need to monetize. So for me, it's more like a long tail marketing kind of thing, in that it gets my voice out there, it gets people interested in the topic, and the more that I feel I educate people on how important sound is, the more I think it raises all boats. So I'm doing my part to kind of help voice actors be appreciated for what they do, because what we do is important along with everything else, but what we do is important.
So
And
a takeaway there,
yeah,
that I'll use the expression. I like to put a big red bow on and go, look and listen to what Jodi just said here. So and it's not for everyone, but you said a big part of it for you. It's a marketing tactic, meaning you have an opportunity to have meaningful conversations with potential clients without the pitch happening.
Yes. It's a win-win.
You know,
I
they
get
don't
them
feel
out
like you're
there.
pressuring them to,
Yeah.
hey, hire me, put me on your roster, give me spots, give me narration. You're positioning it, hey, this is an opportunity for you to get some more eyes and ears. Then there's several conversations that take place. They're getting to know you, they're getting to like you, they're getting to trust you.
Mhm.
And then when it comes time, when they think, oh, I need a female voice or something, well, geez, Jodi put us on her podcast. Let's hire her. I
Yeah.
have to think that's happened more than once for you already.
Oh, yeah. It's a much easier sell that way, let me tell you.
There you go. Listen up, Go Get It Nation.
Yeah.
Stop asking about what's the perfect email to send to get your demo opened and start thinking a little more long term and creating and cultivating a relationship. It's huge, 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 huge that you said that, Jodi. We got a question from Jim Cooper. He said, what do you think, what's the impact that you envision on AI on corporate branding in the VO industry?
You know what? It's hard to say at this point. I know that it's going to have some kind of an impact. And I have to believe that the people who are going to use that on a regular basis really don't care about quality. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're going to use an AI, then you are definitely making most of the pricing. Like that's your big
That's your
problem.
driver.
Yeah, that's your driver. Because an actual human being is always going to be able to do this better than an AI. I just have to believe that because we have acting and they don't. Eventually, I know that there is going to be some emotional response from the AIs. I've already heard this happening, but it's going to take as much time for the person producing this to program it in as it would to just have a voice actor do it.
Yeah, good point.
So, I have to feel that in order to not be completely just like um worried about this. I would rather not worry about it. I'd rather just keep doing what I'm doing and hope that I'm giving value to my clients. I want to believe that the people who really are concerned with quality and having a human touch to the emotional points of their script are going to hire a real person.
Gotcha.
And I mean, it depends on what you're working in. Like some of the things that could go to AI, I wouldn't want to do. So that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
Gotcha.
And if
Gotcha.
someone is going to pay AI and they don't want to pay my rates, well then go to the AI. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. That's the same argument that satellite is going to destroy terrestrial radio.
Yeah.
Cable's going to destroy broadcast TV.
Change happens.
Yeah,
Change happens.
streaming is going to
Yeah.
end the music business. Now it's different,
Yeah.
certainly different,
Mhm.
but everyone adapts
Yes.
unless you're Blockbuster.
Yeah. That was or Kodak.
Or Kodak, another good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just have to adapt. And Jim, I don't think you got anything to worry about, brother, especially with
No.
your pipes. You'll be getting all kinds of gigs, that's for sure. A little quick hello to John McBride and Damon Allums who have jumped on board. Thank you for joining us on the show. Let me remind you guys, we got Jodi here for a few more minutes. If you have any questions, and a reminder, I'll be sticking around for a few moments. That anybody that wants to hang out on Clubhouse and have a chat with me, just jump in the room and we'll get our chat on. So, speaking of Clubhouse, you and I are having a discussion about that.
Yes.
And that is quite the shiny object.
Yes,
right now. And, it fits. You are definitely someone who I would consider a credible resource when it comes to audio and the impact it has on marketing. Because I get asked all the time, is Clubhouse worth it?
Depends on what you're using it for.
Do tell.
Well, I think that Clubhouse is a place for conversations. It's not a place to broadcast something without interaction. As a precursor to a later discussion, I love what you're doing with that, Corey. So that's like a great idea. But as just a place where you broadcast your podcast, no.
Not going to fly.
Not gonna fly because no one's gonna sit there and just listen to someone monologue. They don't want a presentation, they want a discussion.
Mm.
So that's what it's all about. And what I love about it is that it's a connection using the human voice, which is such an intimate medium. You can get to know someone really well by the sound of their voice, whereas you can follow them on social media and any other place and not know a thing about them really. You know, you can see pictures of their pets and stuff like this, but unless you've met them in person, it doesn't really have the same impact.
Doesn't resonate.
It doesn't resonate, exactly, and yet, when you have a discussion with someone on a Clubhouse room in a Clubhouse room, it makes an impression, and when you follow each other, you're automatically pinged when they go into a room, and so you know what they're talking about, and you can revisit the things that they're talking about and go into a room because they're there because you wanna continue a discussion. It makes a deeper connection. And
Gotcha.
I just feel like as a social, media connection place, that I think it is, like head and shoulders above the other social media platforms because it just makes that connection all the more deeper, all the
Well,
more
you've helped turn my frown upside down on
Yeah.
it. We got a couple of more questions from the crowd here. John Grimes asks, "What has surprised you the most by having a podcast? Something you would have never thought of as a positive outcome."
Ah, being thought of as an authority on audio. I mean, that I really I consider myself to be a guide and a facilitator more than an expert per se, but, as I talk to more and more people, I'm learning more and more, and I'm getting more passionate about what this is all about. So, yeah, that's been a strange revelation because when you do a podcast, people think you're an authority on whatever you're doing a podcast on.
Boom.
So, yeah.
Boom. There's a teaching point right there. Yet another reason to do a podcast. You will be perceived as an authority on the subject that you're talking about. Now, assuming you don't just play static for 30 minutes. If you're
Yeah,
talking intelligently,
sure.
you'll be viewed as an authority on that subject.
Mhm.
Um, got another question here. Craig asks, "Do you think Clubhouse will keep going?"
Yeah, you know what? I think it will. I don't think it's going to stay static. I think it will evolve into something, and it may be the early precursor of what we end up with. It may not be Clubhouse that we end up with. We end up with something in social media that is something similar and does a similar thing, but isn't Clubhouse. It's entirely possible. I know right now it is Apple only,
Sure.
because you can only get on using the Apple operating system. And I feel like a total imposter because I have an iPad in my house, and that is the only Apple device I have in my entire house, and I'm on my iPad.
Okay. Well, you got access.
So, those of you who are on Android, that is a way to get around. But yeah, right now it is invite only, so, yeah, I think it's going to only get bigger. And even now, I'm finding a lot of rooms are huge.
Oh yeah, I've seen like thousands in a room.
Yeah, like, they had Elon Musk on there not too
Oh
long ago,
goodness.
and
Yeah.
he broke the app. Like, so many people wanted in that room that the app broke.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
crazy. But
it
I
is
can
pretty
believe it.
crazy.
I
Yeah,
can believe it. Another
yeah.
question here. Mark Harrietha asks, he loves the Canadian voiceover discussion weekly. Wait, are we allowed to talk about that? We can, Mark.
You
For
totally
you,
can.
briefly, for you, because you're family. But yeah, so you're doing a Canadian Clubhouse sort of weekly chat, I
Well,
guess.
Dervla actually started doing a sort of weekly chat where a lot of originally it was about Canadian voiceover, and then last week we did something that was just about marketing, and it had people from all over on it on the panel, and I was a part of that, and it was a lot of fun. So that was at 7 p.m. Eastern on Sunday night. And I actually have a clubhouse that I do regularly on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern talking about the power of sound. It's called
Excellent.
audio branding,
Perfect.
and I'm there every week. So anyone is welcome to join and join the discussion because I don't like monologuing.
No, no, no. Guys, go get a nation. Put that on your schedule. 2 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesdays. Check out Jodi's room in Clubhouse. And I also think in that the room that Mark Harrietta was mentioning, a friend of mine and client, Mr. Mike Tobin, was.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's a good
Mike's
dude.
great.
Man.
Yeah.
He's smart, man.
Oh,
Smart.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Every time I get off the phone with him, I think I just earned a degree. He's just a smart dude.
Yes, definitely, and he was involved in the marketing thing on Sunday night and had a ton of truth bombs to
Yep.
drop on us. Yeah,
He is a good representative. So,
he's really good.
what is the typical schedule for the audio branding podcast? When should Go Get It Nation be on the lookout for your episodes?
It comes out at 7 AM every morning, 7 AM Eastern on every Wednesday morning, which is why I do the audio branding chat at 2 o'clock on that same day.
Can you say back sell? Yes,
Yeah, well, I mean, whether or not people have listened to it,
I'm
it's a
sure.
room that opens.
I'm sure they have.
But
And
I
you
have a
can
lot of
also
fun.
get other episodes access through your website, I'm sure.
Yeah, audiobrandingpodcast.com. Very simple.
And it's also on your voiceover website too.
It
Isn't there a
is.
link to it there as well?
It is, yeah. It's the podcast section on my website, but also it's the blog section on my website because I put my show notes in the blog, and when I do a solo episode, I actually write it first.
Oh, okay.
And that's my blog. So I speak the blog, basically.
So you're doing a little SEO stuff at the same time too by keeping your site chock full of fresh verbiage.
Well, Corey, that's how I started. I was an SEO internet marketing person back in 1995. So
Wow,
before I got into voiceovers in 2007, that was what I was doing.
that is not foreign to you at all.
Mm. No, it's not. Not at all. No.
Well, I got to tell you, Jodi, I mean, we could certainly keep this conversation going because you have so many truth nuggets to share about podcasting, about audio. But we'll leave them wanting more. We'll have you come back for another episode.
Sure.
Scott Marlowe asked real quick, what's the URL for your website?
It's at voiceoversandvocals.com.
Voiceoversandvocals.com, Scott,
Mhm.
just so you have that. Anybody else who is wondering, that is Jodi's website. Jodi, it was awesome to catch up with you. This was long overdue.
Yeah, thanks.
Too much fun, too
Mhm.
much awesome information. And I really thank you for going ringside with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool. Have a great afternoon. Go Get It Nation. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Go get it.